Welcome back to I Am African podcast. I am your host, Liz, and I had to remind people. I am Congolese. I just love representing my country, and I'm here with two amazing guests. I know I say that about everyone, but I think all of my guests are amazing. And so I'm really excited to be hosting this episode with my incredible guest. I have Chukwunike. Did I say that right?
No, Chukwunweike.
Chukwunweike. Okay. All right. And then I have Lucia. Uh, I usually have nicknames for them. So this is going to be very interesting for me to move forward and not have to call them by their nickname. But I do want to honor the fact that you have your names there. So I'm going to go ahead and let our guests introduce themselves and then I'll introduce the topic for the day. But we're going to start with ladies first. I'll start with Lucia. Go ahead and just introduce whatever you want to say about yourself. That's it.
All right. Hi, I am Lucia, Zambian. I'm a healthcare worker and a business owner, and I'm here to, talk about the African experience in America.
Yes, I love that.
My name is Chukwunweike. I work as a controls engineer. No companies to be specific. It's been a fun experience here in the US. A lot of stories and tales to tell. I think as the series progresses, we'll get more into details on my experience here so far.
Okay, where are you from, if you don't
Oh, I'm
mind?
from Nigeria.
Okay.
Your nails already tell where I'm from. So.
Okay, no, this is actually not the Nigerian flag colors. Nice
It's
try.
what? It's what?
It's not that's not the right green. You have the wrong green.
Okay. But a green color, right?
Yeah, but this is
That's it.
actually a
That says
green
it
from
all.
somewhere else. So I'm going to introduce the topic. And the topic today is the African experience in the West. And I actually wish that we had someone from Canada. We had people from the UK, but unfortunately, our experiences are kind of in the US. Hopefully we have people from the UK willing to step up and share the experience, or some people from Canada. We'll figure that out as we go. But the topic we're going to share about the experiences of African in Western societies, we're going to have discussion on the initial thoughts when you arrive in the Western Hemisphere. In this case, we'll be talking about coming to the US and some of the misconceptions about America and adjusting to the new life. Because when we all come here, we have heard things that made us excited to be in the US in particular. And our guest here will kind of reflect on the challenges of fitting into the new culture while maintaining their African roots as well. And so the main question for today is, what surprised you the most about living in the West? Let's say that. And not just the US, like just, because you all probably stopped in London, you stopped somewhere in Europe before you came here. Like the whole experience, what surprised you the most? I think we'll go ahead and start with Lucy, because I already seen your face. You're ready.
No, I'm actually not. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to say? Honestly, I would say the thing that surprised me the most about America, this might be controversial. I think back home, and I'll say that a lot referring to Africa, we had this idea of like, you come to America and boom, you're rich, you have money, you're this, you're just enjoying life, you're living lavish and stuff like that. And I was just shocked by some of the stuff that I saw. Like there were times when I would drive into or go into certain areas and I'm like, oh wow, this is, just as bad as it is, if not worse in certain parts. Because when people thought about Africa back then, they always saw as some people say, poverty porn, where they'd see hungry children walking around in the streets and broken down houses or people living in huts and stuff. So I think for me, it was just that disillusionment of seeing America. Yes, it is the glitz and glam, but also there's another side of America that isn't necessarily always talked about, at least at that time when I came here. So that was a shocker for me.
Yeah. I agree with you because I actually have seen more homeless people here than I actually did when I was growing up. People were homeless in terms of like, you would see orphans like walking around, but I didn't see like people laying down, sleeping under bridges. And maybe because we didn't even have bridges where I grew up, like, you know.
I feel like, yeah, I agree.
So that's a unique perception, and a lot of people have shared the same experience. Let me see what Chukwunike have to say. Yeah, I could see your facial expressions.
So for me, coming to the United States, what seems a bit different from where I'm from in Nigeria is the culture. there's a lot of cultural differences. You have people who think totally different from you. Growing up as a child, you're brought up with a whole lot of hustling spirits. You want to get your hands on everything you see, every opportunity that comes your way. You make sure you harness every opportunity and not just, oh, let's just see how things go. But coming here and see how laid back a lot of people are, especially when I was in college doing my master's program, there are a lot of people who just took the easy route to life, go and get student loans, not bothering about paying those loans, get into debt. You see students buying cars that's $5,000, having $60,000 student loans to pay off. So they already set themselves up for failure while just getting into or just basically starting off life. For me, over there in Nigeria, everything was done based off you pay off cash. You want to buy a house, you're buying cash. You want to buy a car, you're buying cash. And here, a lot of people eat out a lot. So for me, it was kind of difficult because when I came here, I'm not from a place whereby we go out and eat. You make your own meals, make it how you like it. Here, in Nigeria, you could you just walk down the street and you can basically do shopping for your dinner just by going down the street. Over here, you're taking like 20, 30 minutes drive just to go grocery shopping and you're not getting everything you want fresh. You're basically mostly processed food. And basically, those are the various changes I've seen. The hustling spirit, like I said, cultural differences, and all that. Yeah.
Culture is very big because there's like, we're going to get to the topic of like the African American versus African. And I feel like the statement that you made about the hustling spirit is one of the things that people who are not African or African American have tried to connect to African Americans. So I'm really intrigued to see how that conversation goes. But I agree with you on like the culture because depending on where you go in America, right? There are places a lot of Americans don't really have culture unless like they live in certain parts of the country. And there is lack of culture, and that culture is actually bought in by immigrants. It's not like it's people that came outside of the US that have bought a lot of culture and like they contribute to that. But when we all come to the US, we see a lot of things that are different. And for me, I would say that when we came here before, they would show us pictures of like New York. Then like this, you have this skyline and everything, like things look so appetizing. And then we go and we land into New York. You're like, whoa, this is exactly what was described. But then you sleep in New York one night and then you wake up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And that was literally like the same thing as like the refugee camp that we lived in. The trees, the house that we lived in. And we actually had a better house in the camp than the house that we were staying in when we came to the US. I remember my younger brother being like, Mama, when are we going to get to America? The very next day after we slept in Louisiana. So
See,
there's a big difference when you come here, what they preach to you, what they tell you about, like, being in the Western world versus what you actually come to see. And I really would like to see what people that live in like the other parts of the Western hemisphere or like the Eastern hemisphere have to say about this topic. But you guys have both touched on things that a lot of people have seen. What else do you feel like is something that surprised you that people don't really talk about?
I think you basically don't know how black you are until you come into the US. So coming into the US, I knew there's a difference between being black American and also being an African because the
Mm-hmm.
black people treat you differently from the way even the white people will treat you. Like because of the culture, exact whatever I said before, cultural differences. Like for example, the way an African man or a Nigerian man would appreciate life or take out his about his daily activities is totally different from the way a black American will go or take on his daily activities. You can see someone who's earning like $3,000 a month, and what's this person's goal for life is to have like an American muscle car, and you see a monthly payment of $2,200. How do you use basically half your paycheck to get the car note? Like the kind of goals and aspirations I've seen from Black Americans specifically, it's mind blowing. Like I'm always in shock when I listen to how someone's thought process or what are your goals and aspiration in life. They can't even tell you what they want to do with their life. There is no mentorship. As a child growing up in Nigeria, I grew up as a child wanting to be like my father so much because he was the first masculine figure I encountered, the way he took up personality of being a Christian, the way he went about his personal life, the way he treated his kids, the way he acted around everyone, his humility. I just wanted to be that so much. Even the way he dressed as a man. Even to the point that on my wedding day, I dressed like my father. I wanted to be like him so much. So that's because I had a father figure. Not everybody had a father figure or a maternal figure to look up to. Now, those are some of the limitations a lot of people around here have. Now, I was opportune to be exposed to that lifestyle. Someone to caution me when I'm deviating, I'm going astray. Someone to call me back and redirect my steps. I had all of those. Someone that tells me, oh, if you make $1 a month, you have to save some of it, right? Because there's something called a rainy day tomorrow. There are a lot of people who just live paycheck to paycheck. No matter how much they earn, they can never save. They just basically spend everything that comes into the account. I didn't grow up that way. And that was because, my upbringing was totally different from what I've seen. And I wasn't introduced into the culture of, you have to get into debt to survive. So my very first year in the US was a bit of a struggle trying to understand why I have to get into debt to have a credit score. Because I came here, I didn't have a credit card till about, I think I was 6 months in. I'm like, why do I have to get into debt just to be able to survive? I don't want to do this. But it felt like I couldn't even get the car. Neither can I buy a house without a credit history. So all of that were like new lessons for me. I had to learn and get used to the fact that, okay, debt is a good thing. So that's my own story.
Lucy, you seem, I feel like you agreed, but also some of the statements kind of shocked you. Do you want to share your thoughts?
No, not really.
Except you have to. Thank you.
Try to get canceled, but I'll talk about my own experience. So I think the difference between Chooks and I, or Chooks,
Yeah, you can
and
call me Chuck, sorry.
I was like, I was trying to read anyway, the difference between our experiences is, I think it's similar, but a little bit different. For me, I grew up here, so I kind of like saw how like my family has these African ideals of like, paying for things cash, not taking on debt and stuff like that. And when it came to actually opening a credit card, I didn't know. I had to kind of learn by myself, basically, because those weren't things that they were used to or like raised me on back for being from back home. So it's interesting to see someone who's just, they came here, picked it up within 6 months and kind of went with it and stuff. And for me, I was like, all right, Discover card, what you saying? And kind of like growing up here, but also learning certain things from back home and then having to reconcile the two and figure out your path, because the way of life here is different than the way of life back home. Whereas like back home, you have a lot of like, we have more family to depend on. We have different like structure, financial structure, different things to fall back on. Whereas here it's like, you're kind of having to pave your own way a little bit. And it's different. It's a brave new world, but so it was just interesting to hear the difference in dynamics, but also the similarities. Let's see. He talked about how the culture is different, and I agree. I think it's interesting. It's different, but also I feel like as someone who didn't really have their formative years back home, I can only talk about my experience up until a certain age, and then also talk about how the household that I was raised in had these ideals and had these inputs that I don't think a lot of people that like my peers here in America had. I remember like thinking about my career and what I want to do and stuff, and having to talk to my family about that, and like checking in with them and having it being like a discussion. That's something that I'd always seek advice on. And I still do to this day, talk to family about like my goals and all that stuff when I realize some people may not have that and they just kind of have to figure it out on their own. And that's never something that I really stopped to think about. So yeah, that I was processing all of that when I was listening. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And something that you both brought up was family, the importance of family. With Africans, you were born, your family, you're part of the family. It's not, you can't wake up and be like, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. So the family dynamics are very different for like people in Africa versus for like, and I want to make sure I make this known that when we talk about Africa and like most of the experience that we're talking about our own personal experience. We're not speaking for the whole continent, but I do want to highlight the fact that we might all come from different countries. We have Congo, we have Zambia, we have Nigeria. We might all come from different families, but there are overrows of similarity between all of our, like, you know, our countries. And that is the values, the cultures a little bit, the family. That one is very important throughout. Like, I don't think there is a place in Africa where you're like, yeah, I was born in this family, and then you just abandon your family and you go. We all are born to be loyal to family. And something that Chooks said about the family in the US is that there is a little bit of disconnect in the, like, how family is valued. People would, like, the family dynamic is different. There's a lot of like single parenting here, and that's because I noticed that there's a lot of freedom of choice, freedom of speech, freedom, a lot of to do anything with your life, right? A lot of our family dynamics are the way they are. And I can see, because of, like, you know, there was a lack of freedom at one point for women, especially. And if the same thing was, like, let's say the level of freedom that women have here was also applied in Africa or your countries, do you think the dynamic would have stayed the same? Because I can see in the US, a woman can wake up and be like, I don't want to be this. Or a child can wake up and be like, oh, my family is too stressful for me. I want to, I don't remember the word, but I want to basically detach myself from my parents. And like, they can walk away and build a whole life by themselves. And they can do this legally without feeling any kind of remorse. Do you think if we had this level of freedom in Africa, our family dynamics would have been the same?
How do you define this term freedom?
You can do whatever you want. That's literally how it is here, except you have to do it legally in some situation, but you can choose and say, I don't want anything to do with my family. You move away and not feel anything bad about it. But for us Africans, we like royally cannot wake up and just say we're going to walk away from our family without feeling guilty, and like without feeling like you are basically abandoning your family.
I think the difference between Africa and the US in terms of when it comes to females or women, it's empowerment. There's a difference between an American woman and, let me say, a Nigerian woman. Most American women are financially buoyant. They can stand for themselves. They can fend for themselves. They can take care of themselves. They can do whatever thing. You guys, for example, I'm sure you both have homes. How many women in Nigeria can basically buy their life? I believe that what most women also in Nigeria have, that financial stability, will basically see the same thing we're seeing here repeat itself in Nigeria or in Africa. Now, the reason why it's not that way is you have a father and you have a mother figure in the house, and most parents are very, very financially buoyant, such that their kids know if they misbehave, they'll lose a lot on when it comes to inheritance. Once they know that, oh, if I go astray, I lose the backbone, I won't have my father or my mother's backing anymore. If something goes wrong, I can't go back to my father's house. Over here, they don't care. They can move to their friend's house, they can be by themselves. You can basically work in Chick-fil-A and you're good. You'll be able to take care of your basic needs.
Yeah,
So
not
that's the
chicken.
difference. Financials is a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. Lucy, do you have something to say?
When you talked about how the structure of the family is a little bit different here versus back home, it
Mm-hmm.
made me think about the sociological aspect of it. I just feel like, okay, I feel like there was this concerted effort, it seems, to kind of oh my god, I can't believe I'm saying this, like, this is kitchen table talk for me, but I feel like there was a lot of an effort to kind of, when I guess in the 70s, to kind of crack down on people who were doing drugs. And I feel like a lot of that sent a lot of African American men to prison and broke down families, where people who were married or had kids or whatever ended up having their husbands or the men in their community being arrested en masse. And when I studied sociology and I saw that, I thought, geez, this seems almost intentional, because it's like you have these children who are being raised by their moms solely, being raised in a single family household, which I don't think we have something similar like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's so intentional back home, at least in Zambia, that I remember. So there are a lot of factors that can, affect a culture or affect a group of people beyond just, the small things.
Mm-hmm.
That was just something that I wanted to also point out. As far as freedom, again, I haven't really experienced being an adult back home, but speaking from my experience here, I think having the opportunity to go to school, having the opportunity to actually get a job upon graduation
Mhm.
is a big deal. And it's really been helpful for me because I know from seeing like my family or my cousins back home, they may go to school, they may graduate, but they may not be able to have a job unless they have connections or someone who can help them get jobs. So that also affects their ability to be upward mobile or anything like
Yeah.
that if they don't have family to depend on or, if they don't have their own businesses.
Yeah.
So what I've seen is certain family members starting their own businesses because they're not able to find opportunities. And for me, I champion that because I'm like, that's great. If you
Mhm.
don't, if nobody's handing you an opportunity, then make one for yourself. So it's just, I'm interested to see how things progress in Zambia or, at least in Lusaka and see how people, what the repercussions will be down the line.
I think I have something to add to what she said about single parenting here in the US. Should I tell you what the major difference is? The major difference is even in Nigeria, you have women who are just single parents. They are just like widows, for example. They lost their husband due to illnesses and all of that. What differentiates between the Nigerian community and the American community is you have what is called what's this term? It's called community parenting. You get
Yeah.
you get mentorship when you're in school. Growing up as a child, even as an adult, I still have some of it. I was very stubborn, very very stubborn. My father is the
Surprise.
my father is the kind of person who would discipline me at home, and when I go to school, I tend to show some of that. I have teachers who would also discipline me.
I
I
agree with
was
that.
I was a chronic noisemaker. So that's where you have community parenting. You can't just misbehave. You can't just sag your pants and walk on the streets. And you don't have an old woman who's looking at you. I'm like, young boy, come pull up your pants. There's someone to caution you, and there's always guidance. If you don't get it at home, somebody on the street
Mhm.
going to pull you back. I'm like, oh, you're doing this wrong. If you, for example, you steal, you take something that is not yours. Before you get home, they've already beat you up on the street and they drag you back home, and your parents will give you the second round. So at every point and every aspect in your life, there's something called discipline. If you're not being disciplined at home, the community is going to discipline you. So over here in the US, you see kids who slap their parents and beat up their parents. You can't try that in Nigeria. If you beat up your parent or you hit your mom, all she has to do is cry, and your neighbor is in and coming to rescue her basically. And they are going to bounce on you. It's not like, oh, you do something and you just walk away. There's no punishment. Either you don't get discipline in school, you don't get discipline at home. When you go to church, there's someone in church to discipline you. You have what you call the children class in church. There's someone teaching you about the Bible, you misbehave, they'll still whoop you in church. I got whooped a lot in church. So there's at every point in your life, there's discipline. So having to say that being a single parent is a reason not to have disciplined kids or is a reason to have kids who are wayward, it doesn't fly that way in Nigeria because at every point in your life in Nigeria, there's someone to caution you.
Yeah.
That's the major difference I see.
I didn't
Yeah.
say that a reason to have undisciplined kids. I
No, no,
don't think
no. I was just reiterating your point.
I agree. Oh my gosh, you just unlocked memories because I'm like, I remember my parents
Yeah.
didn't really. I was a good kid. I didn't get whooped at home,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
It should.
Mm.
I know I have issues with it. Why are my teachers whooping me? Because honestly, but no, I agree. I think there is a lot more input in the family. Like you have neighbors and family or people in the community who will be like, no, you don't do that. They'll
Mhm.
check you. There are a lot of guardrails. So I think I agree. But I also do wonder, we're talking about our own experiences. Are we saying that in all of Nigeria or all of Zambia, there are people who are not wild or who, don't do crazy stuff?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There are people who do a lot of different things, right? And regardless of how you discipline people, because sometimes, confession, I studied sociology when I was in undergrad, and sometimes the environment that you grow up in influence how you grow, like you grow up or how you behave. And some people's mindset, if you discipline them, they want to do more because they know you're going to get tired of disciplining them and you're going to give up. There are people whose mindset is like that. So some of us got disciplined and we turned out to behave, right? Because you don't want more of that whenever you are disciplined. But, and also, FYI, we're not saying it's okay for you to go and beat up your children. We're not saying that because it's a different situation in the US as opposed to some of our countries in Africa where it was like, normal to discipline a child. We're not saying go and start disciplining your child. Please, we're not condoning physical violence or anything like that.
Let me correct that point, right?
Yes.
Discipline a child doesn't mean you beat up that child. You use your words most times. In your school, when your teachers see that you misbehave, they call you like, tell me the reason why you do this.
Hmm.
Why
Yeah.
did you do this?
Yeah.
What do we do? How can we make your life better? They're
Hmm.
looking for ways to make your life better. A teacher is someone who knows your strength and your weakness, no matter how you try to look at it. They see, okay, this guy is good in maths. Definitely, if this guy is good in maths, he shouldn't end up in an art class wanting to do literature or drama. If he's good in maths, he's good in physics, he's definitely going to do something relating to science. So they're already there to structure your life. Your life, right from when you're born and you start going to school to the very moment you leave, let me say, high school and get into college, you have people who have seen your strengths and your
Hmm.
weakness. They already know, okay, with the way this person is structured, this guy is supposed to do something relating to science or something relating to arts. A lot of people here don't have that guidance.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see a kid here, 13, 14, they don't know what they want to do. You ask them, what do you want to do in future? They have no idea. There's no picture. They've not structured their mind. In school, when you get in school, your first couple of years in high school or secondary school, as they call it in Nigeria, is what do you want to become in future? They start putting that thought in your head. What do you want to become in future? They ask you to write an essay on what you want to become. Like you have to think yourself into the solution.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's all has to do with what you're exposed to as a child. I went to a private school. In private schools, because private schools in Nigeria are expensive. So in private schools, you do essay, they take you out for debates and all of that. You always have to think your way out of several problems.
Hmm.
What do you want to be in future? They'll tell you to write an essay, submit essay of 300 words. You have to put down something. And
Hmm.
then they ask you to read your essay and tell them, oh, why do you think this is a good idea? Or why do you think this works for you? But you have read, this is your strength, this is your weakness. Why do you think you should want to become an accountant if you're not good with numbers? Oh, you want to go into economics. Okay, what was your grade in economics last semester? Oh, you had a D. Okay, how do you think you can better yourself? How do you think you can up those grades? There are people to guide you. The educational system here in the US is totally different from what I'm exposed to. I did college in Nigeria, and in Nigeria, in a semester, you can do like 13 to 14 or 17 courses a semester. I came here for my master's, and I was given like 3 courses a semester. I was like, God, I'm in heaven. I have never experienced that before. And I did so well because this level of stress that I faced doing my university, my undergrad, my bachelor's in Nigeria is totally different.
Different. Yeah.
In Nigeria, you can't work part time and do college. Like you struggle. Imagine having to do 17 to 13 courses a semester, and after doing that, you go do a part time job. Like how? How do you cope? It's not possible. So the environment is totally different.
Hmm.
I'm happy with the exposure I got here because what I was exposed to in Nigeria prepared me for what I'm facing right here. It was easy for me to adapt. Nigeria is, will I say, tougher. Reason why it's tougher is you have a lot of people with bachelor's degree looking for the same position. You're looking for an entry position level in Nigeria. You have someone who has a PhD, a master's, also applying for that position. An entry level position because the opportunities are limited. Now you come here and there are so many opportunities. Whatever thing you decide to set your hands into, I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like you're going to succeed as long as you have a direction on what you want to achieve. You have
Yeah.
a master's degree. You don't. If you're getting a job, they're definitely not going to put you on an entry level position because the master's degree, I expect, oh, you're supposed to stand at a different level based on your experience and may say your age. In Nigeria, they don't care about your age or your expertise. If the position available is entry level, they are going to start you on an entry level position. And you have to work your way to the top, and it's going to take you a long time. But here, things are totally different. And I
Hmm.
like it
Yeah.
here. I like it here a lot. I wouldn't lie to you. It's way better than where I'm from. The competition is less.
Wow. Wow. So you touched on a lot of different things. But like there is a lot of things, and I actually want to go back to the discipline conversation because there was something I wanted to say. A lot of us, we grow up and we make jokes about the African aunties. We have those aunties, the ones that would judge you regardless of where you are. Like when you go out and you're going to be around aunties, you're like, oh, shoot, am I dressed right? Like, that is what Chooks was referring to. The community parenting. Aside from like your family being like, what are you wearing? If you manage to sneak out of the house wearing something, just know that you're going to run into someone. One of the aunties that's going to give you the eyes will make you turn around and go and change your clothes. So the whole concept of community parenting, it's very true beyond like having to like discipline. It's also like the people that you end up being around, they kind of put your mindset in a way where you have to think twice about the things you do. And sometimes it can be a positive thing if you look beyond like the negative aspect of it. In the US, if the same concept was there, people would be seeing it as you care too much about what people have to think, or it's controlling. But sometimes it's not about control. It's not about you caring what people have to think. It's about what is right and what is wrong. You brought up a point about having like accepting the idea of debt, and that will kind of lead to the education part, the conversation that we have. But you brought up idea of accepting debt as a good thing for you to progress forward. So it's like you have to move backwards for you to progress forward. But we've all like, we were like when we came to the US, that's another thing they don't tell you. When you come here, back home, you pay everything in cash. You can even negotiate. If they say it's $5, you say I have $4. They will take the $4. But when you come to the US, you need a card. Not everywhere they take cash, and it's for the sole purpose of you having to use a bank account. Back home, some of the people don't even trust banks, so they'll keep the money at home. And here, you are basically forced in a way to keep your money to where someone else is benefiting from your money while you're not using it. And so you put your money in the bank account and you have to use a card, and you don't know the process of that card. So when we all come here, you go from like a situation where you get to bargain, you get to like, know who you're buying from. So you don't know who you're buying from. You can't even ask them, hey, can I take this at a lower price? Or I don't have enough money. Well, you have to have enough money for you to pay for it. So that part is different. But then going to credit cards. So if you don't have enough money, just go ahead and apply for a credit card, and they'll loan you money, and then you use that money and then you pay back with interest rate.
A lot of it.
A lot of interest. So how does that like fit into the like the surprise? Because no one tells you this part of being in the like Western world or being in America. No one tells you these things. But how does this fit like for you guys? Were you shocked about like this whole concept, or did you just like see, oh, this is normal, this is what happens, and then you just got used to it?
I think for me, my first experience with the credit card was an eye opener to always read the details of everything you sign before getting into it. I think I got a Discover card as well with, I think, $2,000 in the card. And I used all of it. And the instruction says just pay the monthly payments. So I was just doing the base pay. I did 4 straight months and I checked what the balance was. I'm like, I've paid 4 times, but I can't see like this money is dropping. It looked like it was still the same. And I'm like, let me go back and read the terms and condition of what I signed. And when I checked, it was like 27, 29% APR. I was like, wow. But no one tells you because, or they tell you, they just give you because you applied for it. And they give you a slip, but no one goes through the process of, oh, let me understand what this document says. Or when I found out that, oh, you're just making more money for these people, I'm like, okay, everything I have to do, mostly basically right now, I have to think about, do I really need this thing? And then I'll decide, okay, do I want to go into debt or not? So that was my first experience with it. When I noticed that what was the idea that was sold to me was different from what I was being debited for every month with the interest accumulation that came with it.
So, in their defense, they have it in terms of conditions that are like 13 pages long that you have about 30 seconds to review and sign. But if you're desperate, most of people don't read those things. And now we have AI. Please copy that thing and put it in ChatGPT and say, summarize to me the most important keys in here. I started doing that. I started leveraging AI. ChatGPT is my best friend. Like I'll copy that thing and put in ChatGPT. Tell me what I need to know. Because before, who has the attention span to sit down and read 13 pages? But Lucy, did you have something to say?
Not really. I think for me, my first, I guess I'll say this, my first like inkling with credit was when I was buying my second car. The first car I bought it with cash because, my mom and my brother were there. They were like, my father's late. So they were like, oh yeah, you have to pay cash, blah, blah, blah. So I got it cash. And then when I went to go get my second car, they were like, you don't really have a good, like any credit. And I'm like, okay, but, that's good, right? Like, that doesn't mean anything. And they're like, no, girl, you need to have some kind of credit so that we can know that you're credit worthy. And for me, it just didn't make sense because I'm like, why should I borrow to tell you that I'm worthy of borrowing more money? It didn't make sense. But I think I quickly learned how to start negotiating. And I know, like, we think back home a lot of stuff is negotiable, but a lot of stuff in America is negotiable too. So I learned how to start negotiating about interest rates and all these things because I just felt like once I got my debit card and stuff, and those you can negotiate, but with cars, you can negotiate anything and get better interest rates and move from this and refinance. And I had to kind of read and learn about all of that. And it was just a different experience that I feel like had I known or had I had that like someone who knew this before me, I may have been a little bit more well versed and been like able to maneuver a little bit better. But it is what it is.
Not a
Okay,
lot of
so
people know that you can actually negotiate stuff.
yeah, yeah. Not a lot of people, huh? And I'm not speaking from experience, of course.
If you need someone to negotiate interest rates, call me. I can get
Yeah.
I can get you zero interest rate on a car.
That's the plug, the interest rate plug. You need to start a new social media handle, interest rate plug.
Zero interest rate.
Anyways, so for today, we're going to end here. I would like to thank our wonderful guest, Chooks. I'm going to try your name again, Chukwunweike.
It's going to take you a while.
One thing that I appreciate is that I love how everyone that has been here embraces their names, embraces their identity, and it's a different world today. When we first came to the US, I actually been in the US since 2010, going 15 years. It's been 14 years now. When we came here, being African was something that you didn't even want to accept or claim. You wanted to be Jamaican before you want to be African. So I'm glad that we're in a part of in a time where we can actually embrace who we are as people and also as African. And I just love, and that's why I also wanted to do this podcast, is because I wanted us to define the African identity and show people that Africa is beyond the whole sad faces, the homeless, like homeless and poor children, or the starving kids that we can't throw food away here because we have to save it for them to magically get one day, But
There's
I'm
hungry kids in Africa.
yeah, seriously, there are starving kids in Africa.
There's hungry kids here too. Like
More.
Everywhere.
But thank you both for joining this session and for taking the time for sharing your experiences, for sharing your opinion on some of the topics that we talked about today. We really appreciate it. I am your host, Liz. This is I Am African podcast. When we drop this episode, we'd like to hear from you. Please go ahead and subscribe, follow, comment, share with your family and friends. Let this be a starting point of the conversation on this topic and anything to do with being African. And if you're not African, this is an opportunity for you to educate yourself on some of these matters. Thank you so much for your time.